We are now ready for our next segment. We're going to be chatting with a great group of FTC and first coaches on how to run a team. So I'd like to introduce each of our panelists and have them all say hello. So panelists, turn on your cameras, get ready. And first, I'll want to say hello to Mike Barsava from team 16424, the Atomic Dishwashers. How's it going, Mike?
Pretty good. How are you doing, Karthik?
I'm doing well. So excited to be here today.
Absolutely.
And what do you think the game's going to be?
Oh, I'm really hoping for that water game. If not, maybe basketball.
Basketball would be a pretty cool one. Next up, I want to introduce Dan Monty from team 16413 Edit Robotics and 16415 Low Ellen Nerdy Knights. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Karthik. How are you doing?
I am doing great. This is just like a really fun day. Thanks for coming here, Dan. So you've been an FRC coach, an FTC coach. What are you most excited about for this season?
I'm just excited to have a kickoff, right? And I'm super excited about that to see what the new game challenge is. And I tend to agree with Mike. I think it's going to be a basketball game today.
That would be pretty awesome. Like, I mean, I'm a little sad about basketball right now. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about what happened last night to the Raptors, but basketball is very good, as they say. Next, you saw her earlier today doing our mentee. She's an FTC Planning Committee mentor, but she's also one of the lead mentors for Team 16428, Polar Express, Kate Walsh.
Hi.
Hey, Kate. So we've heard what you're excited about for the game today, but what are you most excited about for fall, just this season?
Oh, I'm excited to get to start working with students again, even if we're going to be remote. I can't wait. I miss everybody so much.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of feeling that. And I think we're going to have a lot of good tips today about how to, run your teams through COVID and running things through remote. Next, we have a Woody Flowers Finalist Award winner from his FRC team, 4039. He's been an FLL coach. He's now an FTC coach as well from team 18433, Makeshift Robotics. Say hello to Matt Alderson.
Good morning, Karthik. How are you?
I'm doing well, Matt. So you're wearing, is it all orange today, or you got like a little bit of rainbow for us?
No, it's the rainbow colors. You got to represent.
That's beautiful. That's looking great, Matt. I can't wait to hear what tips you have for us. And we have a very special guest coming all the way from Australia. He has a lot of tips to share, especially their team's already been meeting through COVID and figuring some stuff out. So we've got Andrew Clark from team 5985 from Australia. Welcome, my friend. Thank you. And I should say good night, good morning. I'm not even sure.
Well, it's about 12:30. That's 10 to 1 in the morning here. So in the language of my people, g'day.
Good day. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad to have some international perspective. And that's what we remember, like, as much as like this is a first Canada production, and, we're going to be talking about, all our teams here in Ontario, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and all the other provinces. Like, first is an international, it's a global program. It's huge in so many other places. In Australia is one of the places. There's an FRC Hall of Fame team from Australia. There's lots of good stuff. So thank you for being here, Andrew. So we're going to get things started. Now, just a reminder to everyone who's watching in chat, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll be answering as many of the questions as possible. We have a lot of things to talk about. We have a lot of really experienced coaches here, and we want to share their expertise with all of you. So my first one, and like, let's just kind of start it easy with a vague one. We're just going to kind of go around the room, and maybe starting with Dan. But what are your like best FTC tips as a coach?
I think as a coach, the one thing you want to do is keep it simple and have fun. I think in your first couple of years, it's really important. The simple part, just to kind of echo from your great presentation, Karthik, if you keep it simple, you'll probably have fun finding effective strategies. And the thing that it took me a while to learn, but it's not just about robots, right? First, we'll mention that. I'm a math guy like you. I started with math, and that was my passion, but it's really about student and mentor leadership and teaching skills for the future. So those are things that I would encourage new mentors to focus on, getting your students involved in the program.
Fabulous. That's some great advice right there. Matt, what about you?
Well, I guess along with our FRC team, one of the things we talk about at the beginning of the season is roles and goals. So understanding what your goal is, what you're trying to get out of the program, and that's looking at it from a mentor point of view, from a student point of view. And then once you've understood those goals, and we're talking about the overarching goals, not the specific goal about we want a robot to do this or this, it's about the program and what the intent of the program is, and making sure that the students are learning and getting excited and motivated about science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's good to go back to those goals as the season's going on. And as a mentor or coach, double check, are we really satisfying the goals that we set for ourselves at the beginning of the season? And then the role part of it is understanding, okay, here's our goal. How do we break that up? How do we function as a team? How do we get people contributing in their area of expertise and work together to achieve our goal? So I think it's important at the beginning of the season to kind of lay that out rather than just jumping into the robot. Understand what your roles are and what your goals are for the season.
That's a really good point, Matt, that I think that gets missed in the shuffle sometimes. But goal setting is really important in first because again, like so often our goals are set for us in tasks that we're given, especially in school settings. But with first, like each team is going to have their individual goals based on their abilities, their resources, whether you're a rookie team, you're an experienced team. And it's not just like, we can talk about this specifically when it comes to gameplay, but it's overarching season. Like a goal a team might have is for everyone's confidence to increase by the end of the season. That's like a very good goal. And like how do you set these? How do you determine them? How do you reach them? There's a great presentation online by Mike Corsetto from FRC Team 1678 on goal setting. Check it out on YouTube. It's a fabulous presentation. It ties into a lot of what Matt was talking about. So really, that's one I hadn't thought of today, but that's fabulous. Kate, what about you? What are your thoughts here?
You know what? My best tips in general, FTC and life, is use the resources that you have around you. Your team is your family, but also First Canada and First in the whole world is really here to support you, and they really care. So it's not a shameful thing to ask questions. It's actually super cool and valuable, because somebody else has that question. Ask questions, work together, like do your thing.
Yeah, and this community, especially for people who are new to this community and might not realize this community, sometimes it's like if you ask for help, it's almost drinking from a fire hose because there's just so many people will offer. Everyone's there to support you, and so if you're struggling, you're missing something, you don't have access to something, reach out. Dave Ellis, who's going to kind of runs FTC for Ontario, send Dave an email and he can try and help you, or he'll definitely connect you to one of the great first senior mentors. One of our producers today, Sarah, is a first senior mentor, and she's one of those people that's out there to support our teams, and also all the other teams support each other. If there's teams in your community, because of them, but we're all figuring out how to deal with distance right now, and just reach out, chat. You might meet someone in one of our Twitch chats today, get their information and share your team's best practices. And that's kind of, all these coaches that are here joining us today for this panel, you could be anywhere else in the world today, but you're here with us. And so that's because they want to share their knowledge with you. And that's what's beautiful about the first community. So I'm going to throw it over to Mike now and see what his best FTC tips are.
I suppose my biggest tip would be remember that it's supposed to be fun, but it's also really hard. To quote Woody Flowers, it's the hardest fun that you'll ever have. So if you're not having fun, try to rethink your problem, try to rethink how you're approaching it. But always remember that one of the first core values is always to have fun.
Yeah, and I think that's a massive one. And the fun, in some ways, it just kind of comes naturally because this is like the robots are fun, but it's important to like not get so caught up in other goals that you lose track of the fun piece, because that can happen sometimes. Like, remember, these competitions, the process of building a robot is intense, and we want it to be intense, and it should be because that's part of the enriching part of it. But sometimes that intensity might not be fun for all the students, and it's about dialing things back and watching the students to see if they're not having fun. And if you're a student and you're not having fun, I know it can be super hard to speak up, and I totally understand that. But if you can't find someone that you trust that you can speak up to, that's really important, because if you're not having fun, maybe others aren't having fun. And that's what our goal here is. And you want to make sure that someone, there knows what's going on. But the fun does kind of happen naturally with this. It's FTC, it's goodness. So Andrew, you're not currently coaching an FTC team, but you have been a first coach for a bunch of years. So what are some of your best tips?
My first one, no matter what team I'm leading, I'll always say you got to build the team before you build any robots. So I'm talking about interpersonal relationships, getting the kids to lean on each other and trust the mentor. The second one I have is possibly a little bit more realistic. Whenever I talk to the kids, I say, you don't have to like each other, but you do have to respect each other. And that's the rule I try and run all my teams by. And it works out pretty well.
the respect piece is very, very massive, because you know respect is a core piece of gracious professionalism, because being professionalism requires respect, and showing that to all others. And I think there's, when it comes to robotics, you might be having a strategy discussion, you might be having a build discussion on how to finish something, and two people will have very different viewpoints on how this task should be done. And that's okay. It's okay to disagree. We don't all have to agree. If we all agreed on how to solve every problem, every robot would look exactly the same and it'd be kind of boring. So it's important to have these disagreements, but when you have these disagreements, it's important to express them in very respectful manners, and it's important to respect the opinion of the other. And so I may have this super strong entrenched opinion and I might be 100% sure that I'm right, but by having respect, I still should have enough respect for my teammate to listen to their full opinion, hear it all out, and absolutely consider it. And that's part of respect. So that's a very important one. We talked a little bit about some of the first strategic pillars and core values, and one of the big ones today, and it's so important in everything we do in our society, is equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I want to put this out there to the panel, and anyone can answer this question. But how do you recruit members to ensure diversity?
I'll go first if you like.
Sure, Andrew.
Sure. So when we're recruiting, we basically do two things. We look at obstacles to people joining, and we try and remove them. So the part I'm proudest of our team is we run a lot of after school classes and school holiday workshops, Lego robotics workshops. And we have a deal with the kids on our team. If you give us your time to teach those classes, we'll teach you how to teach. You can do the season and it won't cost you anything. So we're an independent team. So we've got something like 95% of the kids on our team are taking part in FIRST without cost, because they're giving their time to teach younger children. And as a result, the sheer range of backgrounds we have on 5985 is incredible. We've got from every background you can imagine all come together, working together in this common goal. So that is something I'm particularly proud of. And the side effect of running all these classes is that we're able to identify interested kids years in advance. And that means we can spend years building kids up with the confidence, enthusiasm, and this is something you can do. And we're all over the place with schools and after school groups, heck, even scout groups. And by having such a broad range of students, we're actually literally targeting every area of the community. I think our record, our oldest student, first time we touched a robot was 103.
Pardon me?
Yep. Kids went into a nursing home. We started that for FLL and senior solutions, the senior partners. We've been going back ever since. So we started doing robot lessons for the residents. And we got photos of one of our 11-year-old girls teaching a man named Lance, who was 103, how to program his first robot.
That's amazing. When they say it's never too late to start, that is like the perfect, best example. Because if you can do it at 103, you can do it. That's fabulous. I just love these sorts of stories at first. So, who else has some best practices for recruiting to ensure diversity or to add to the diversity of a team?
So I can talk to that a little bit, Karthik. I think in our society, role models are very important. So we do our best on our team to, once we get engagement from an underrepresented population, to try to spread that knowledge and spread that awareness to other students who might see that person as a role model. So, by word of mouth and by that leadership from students who are already on the team, to try to communicate to students who are like them in whatever way, and bring them into the team. We have something called a Bring a Buddy meeting, where we encourage the students to bring at least one of their friends or somebody they've met in school that they think would benefit by being on a FIRST team, and bring them to a meeting. They're not necessarily a member of the team yet, but they're able to on Zoom join with us and see what it's all about. And even as a quiet observer, sometimes pull in those students who might not otherwise think about being on a robotics team.
Yeah, I think the bring a buddy idea, I really like that because I think sometimes with teams or with any sort of club, it's just kind of like people have the Field of Dreams motto, where if you build it, they will come. You just think that if you have the team, well, whoever is just going to walk in is going to be on the team. But if you really want to get a diverse group and you want to get people who might be a little bit shyer or just a little bit more introverted, you need to really reach out and you need to find a way to get them to see this beauty. I think all of us can agree about the magic that happens at a first event, but how do we get people to that first event? And so often it's just, it's being asked. I know for myself, when I was in high school, I was not someone who ever would have considered robotics at all, but all people, Mark Bredner kind of grabbed me in the hallway one day and said, hey, I think this team, like, you'd be interested in this. And so, but like having, like this young teacher who was like like cool and whatever, say, hey, I think you'd be good at this, was like, oh, maybe I should check it out. And then I was hooked ever since then, and so that's the kind of thing. So like for all you people out there, bring a buddy, because that you could be changing their life. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous, like, hey, I'm bringing them to the robotics meeting, but like literally this has changed so many people's lives over the years. So it's kind of cool. Another topic I want to touch on, and this is something that teams ask about a lot, but you know, robotics can be expensive. Where do your funds come from? How do you raise money? Are you getting funding from your school or from sponsors, from fundraisers? Does anyone want to talk about the fundraising aspect of all of this?
I can speak a little bit to that, Karthik, if you like.
Thanks, Dan.
One of the things that I find is great in talking about team building is involving parents. So that's one way that we encourage our team to kind of have a community vibe. So a lot of parents are actively involved in our community.
Oh, did we lose Dan? I think we lost Dan there.
It is some
back.
community outreach. So, okay, great.
We lost you for a second,
some,
Dan.
Sorry about that. So in terms of having parents involved, they often bring different experiences and diverse experiences, and perhaps some industry connections as well. And in our community, we're located in Sudbury. There's a big influence on mining. So tying robotics to mining is a great fit. So kind of establishing links with industry partners, that's been a great way to encourage sponsorship of the program in our geographic area.
Thanks. That's some really great advice. Anyone else want to talk about their way they've been raising funds? Andrew?
Yeah, I can with that. So, like I mentioned before, 5985 and our Project Bucephalus FLL team, we're independent and community teams. So something like 90% of our income comes from us running those robotics classes I was talking about earlier. So the kids, we organize the kids, they get together, they do the teaching, kids attend the classes, and that's where we get most of our money from. And that model has served us quite well over the years. So I think if you've ever look at what 3132 has done with their robo camps, it's the same type of deal. And we call robo clubs as the after school ones. So if you know how to do Lego Mindstorms or Spike Prime, or even We Do, you can actually set up an after school or school holiday activity that can do a lot of good in the community and also support your team.
That's fabulous. Yeah, those camps, I mean, I've seen a lot of teams who've done stuff like that. It's really, really impressive stuff because like it's twofold. Number one, it's helping out the community, and number two, it's helping out your own team. Kate, you work with a school-based team, correct? So what's fundraising like for you?
So for us, some of it comes from the school and comes from the students, but a lot of where we get our sponsorship and we call it more of a partnership because it's less funding, more in kind and working with people is at our events. So something like at the Canadian National Exhibition, we will have that space for free and then in return do a lot of programming with them. So it's not necessarily like getting money, but more working with your community and looking for things that are advantageous to both the sponsor or partner as well as the team.
Matt, you have something to add?
Yeah, I think if for new FTC teams in Ontario, don't forget about the grants. There are grants available and they don't, sometimes they're not as easy to access as people new to the program might hope, but there are grants available, and through First Canada, you can have access to those. FTC is not nearly the size in terms of budget of an FRC team, so maybe you don't have to go through some of the steps that the FRC teams do in terms of corporate sponsorship and so on. But even the little things, there's something called FlipGive, which our team uses. It's when families of members of the team are doing online shopping, they click a little button, and FlipGive gives a percentage of their purchase back to the team. And it's a little, but a little at a time through a number of people. It can add up significantly for an FTC team.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're interested in those FTC grants, check out the First Robotics Canada webpage where you can find some information, and you'll also find contact information there. Contact one of your first senior mentors or contact Dave Ellis, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. And because First Canada is here to support teams wherever possible. So they'll do whatever they can to help link you up with a grant if eligible. So now we're in a strange world right now, and for some teams, a lot of teams run First as an extracurricular program, but some teams have been running First as a classroom, which is especially appealing this year because of the current restrictions on extracurricular activities that exist in many of our school boards. So I was thinking that maybe Mike or Dan, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your experience doing FTC in the classroom.
Sure. So from a distance, it can really look messy, but learning is messy, and that's okay. Two of the big buzzwords that would surround it would be project-based learning and small group instruction. It can often look like several groups doing one specific task, but all of them are working together on something as a whole. So you might have one group working on coding, one group working on building, one wiring, documentation, and it can seem like organized chaos, but once you get really close to it, you'll see a very high level of student engagement as they're really excited about using robots and learning how to build them more effectively.
That makes a lot of sense to me. That's so fabulous, Dan.
Just one thing that's really great about the FTC program is that you can really adapt it to suit your needs for your particular program. At our school, we're a grade 7 to 12 school. We have a program in our grade 7 and 8 where we kind of keep it simple. We use Kitbot, we use block coding, and then in our senior grades, we have computer science classes where students are using Java programs to control the robots. So there's lots of different entry points for FTC in the curriculum, whether it be all the way down in grade 7 and 8 exclusively, all the way up to grade 12, which is great. That's a great thing about the program.
So you mentioned the grade range there from grade 7 to grade 12. Like, what are the primary differences between, because like that's a massive grade range, So like, what would you be like looking at? Like, what types of lessons and classes are you putting in for grade 7s compared to doing it for grade 12s?
In terms of the instruction, where our particular program came into play is a lot of our feeder schools had the first Lego League, and we were doing the FRC, which are the big robots, and there was a little bit of a skill gap. So when we teach the grade 7 and 8, it's a really good transition to kind of go from Mindstorms and the EV3 kits to a Kitbot. So again, in the grade 7 and 8 curriculum, there's some great things where you can do, as Mike said, some project-based learning that integrate science curriculum for teachers, technology, engineering, and math in one lesson, right, for the grade 7 and 8 in terms of a project. In terms of the senior grades, we do a lot more things like CAD, which I think we'll talk about later, manufacturing, working in shops, as well, computer programming. So there's lots of different ways you can integrate. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize, it is more than robots, as we discussed earlier. We have business classes that actually contribute to the business plan, community outreach, and partnerships. So there's really a great opportunity for all students to get involved and adapt it to your curriculum.
That's really interesting. And so for Mike and Dan, when you do like FTC in the classroom, is this like you're doing FTC based type lessons, or are you running like the full team through the class where they're like building a robot to go compete in competitions?
So we use our class as a feeder for our program. So we have a grade 9 robotics course right now for students to get excited, try it out as a course, but still earn a credit just to help balance out their schedule. After that, we also run our extracurricular programs after school for our senior students, and we're looking to expand it to include our senior students as well in dedicated courses. In terms of the course itself, you always start with safety, because safety has to come first to make sure the students don't hurt themselves while they're working. After that, we start talking about strategic design, what do you want your robot to do? And from there, we get into how do you do it? Buildings, gear ratios, wiring, coding, all those kinds of stuff so that it flows naturally from that. But we always start with safety.
That's definitely the best place to start and so important in everything we do. Kate, do you have any insights in terms of like what options there might be for teachers who are looking to do something in their classrooms?
Yeah, so a really great resource that there is for FTC is this thing called ClassPack. And what you can do is you run the entire competition and entire event through multiple pieces and basically teams in your class, and the whole thing can happen in your class. And what comes with it is a really great training opportunity for teachers where you can be trained and be given resources and curriculum outlines to actually run the full team through your class, get the course credit, and it really amazingly aligns with the Ontario curriculum. So that's a great resource that is available to everybody. You get, they recommend having 2 to 3 students per robot. So you can have multiple students and multiple robots being built in the one class, and then you can all compete against each other. So that's a super awesome resource that's been developed by First Canada as well as First Headquarters. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and there's information for all that. If you head to the First Robotics Canada website, like right on the main page, one of those tiles, there's there. And there was, I believe, some sessions for FTC coaches on class packs that are available on our YouTube channel that you can take a look at as well. One question we had from the chat, Mike, specifically for you is like, how did you set your course up?
Well, we started with what we wanted to do, sort of an end target. We want to be able to compete in all these events. So we're thinking about, well, how do we get this? How can we use this to help grow the school as well? As I mentioned, we always start with safety, talking about how to do everything safely. And from there, we grow into more complex tasks. We're also starting to get some of our senior students, ones that have been on the team for a year, to come in as class mentors. That way, there's multiple voices helping all these groups to move forward.
And for our coaches who've done this in the classroom, how do assessments work? Is it, like, are you putting them out there and like score as many points as possible and that's your grade, or like obviously it's going to be something more established, but how do assessments work in a robotics space class?
Well, I have a very competitive principal, and he actually recommended marking based on performance at tournaments. That
There we
being said,
go.
there are tons of other opportunities for assessment. You can assess productivity, use of class time. You can run safety quizzes if you need something physical. But the engineering notebook for us is really the biggest focus for assessment. It's an opportunity to develop writing skills as well as or presentation skills, all those kinds of things. There's a lot more curriculum connections beyond just the science, technology, engineering, and math that you see right at the forefront. With that, we can get students to present what they're using. So there's connections to dramatic arts as well. And really, a judge's presentation is also there. For grade 7 and 8 teachers, there's tons of connections all across the curriculum, as well as high school connections too.
What about you, Dan?
Just to kind of echo some of those things that Mike has said, I find with the FTC program, it has a built-in assessment tool with the engineering notebook, which is something that you can use to see progress from students throughout an entire semester. The other thing to mention is in the high school setting for teachers that are in a semester-based system, the FTC program really lends itself well to assessment with a culminating activity, as Mike said, of competing in the competition and designing backwards from that to today, right, which is the kickoff event. In terms of assessment for our perspective, we, just like Mike's group, we are competitive, we want to do well, but especially for younger students, it's really important for them to have a feeling of success. So we're also monitoring growth throughout the semester. How do they respond to challenges when things don't work, as we know, which happens in first? How do they respond to that, and how do they grow from those experiences? The assessment piece is very different than instructing a math class, which I also do. It's more about the process as opposed to the end product.
Yeah, so I have a question on the engineering notebook. So typically our teams in the program, a team submits one engineering notebook. But for assessment purposes, do you have each individual student keep their own notebook, or are you still doing the group-based notebook?
Yeah, we from our end, we will work in sub-teams. So just kind of as Kate mentioned, we're doing groups of 2 or 3. So those 3 students will collaborate on a Google Doc as an example to document throughout the year. And as part of the final submission after the competition, they're required as a group to contribute an engineering notebook, a polished one. So we will have multiple groups competing.
Okay.
In our class, we're planning to have 4 teams, and each team will submit an engineering notebook that all of the group members have contributed to throughout the season.
That's some good stuff. That's really neat. And so a couple of you, both of you have mentioned that, the team kind of feeds into the extracurricular. So there is, could you envision a team doing this solely as a curriculum class-based option this year if they didn't have the opportunity to use the extracurricular piece?
I do myself.
Okay.
In our school setting, and I know most schools, in terms of the schedule, it's actually given an opportunity where we actually have double blocks of classes. So instead of having a 75-minute period, we have a 150-minute period, which I find is great for robotics. Students can really dig in for 150 minutes and execute the game task and prototyping and build and the whole fun that happens with the season. So I do really think there is an opportunity to do it in the classroom exclusively.
Although there's definitely a possibility that to run it through the class. I would say that more time is always better. So if you could do both, have a class and extracurriculars, that would be best. Extra driving practice is always a good thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. It's about understanding your resources and then trying to maximize them to push limits and to push boundaries. So it's 2020. It's been a year, and we're all dealing with the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic. And first off, our thoughts go out to anyone who's been directly affected, with illness, their families, and and everything. It's heavy, and we don't want to minimize that, but at the same time, we do want to talk about how COVID-19 is impacting your first teams and how you're going to try and run this year. And you know, there's a lot of people out there trying to figure out what are we doing, and we understand that a lot of people may not even started thinking about this because they're so busy, dealing with other things like trying not to get the virus and trying to manage a classroom and trying to keep our students safe. But I guess I want to go around the room here and start asking either how are you working with your team through COVID right now, or how are you planning on working with your team through COVID? So I'm going to start with Kate.
So what our team is doing, the first thing I said when everything kind of shut down is like, hey, I totally get if you no longer have space in your life to do robotics right now, and I get if you have a lot of extra space in your life to do robotics, because you can have one or the other, you can have neither. So I basically just did a phone call and said, hey, like, let's just do a chat, not about robotics, check in on everyone and say, as long as you will show up, I will be there for you. So whoever wants to show up can show up. Whoever is able, if you wanted to bring a friend, that's cool. And we've just kind of made our team into more of a space for support and making sure that mental health and physical health and emotional is all okay before we become return to hardcore robots. So even if this year we just do like a fewer meetings or remote meetings, we're still going to run. We're going to be for whoever there is there, and we're hopefully going to be taking this opportunity to do some more remote work with people in other provinces and try and do some kind of like pen pal thing, because that was something outreach wise that our team wanted to do. So yeah.
Awesome, Kate. What about you, Matt?
So we've developed a plan for our team. We've been staying in touch online through Zoom meetings, doing a lot of training over the summer, and making sure that we just are there for each other and that we still feel part of things, even though we can't be in the same space. So we have developed a plan, and the plan has to be, I think, flexible. I think we all have to know that we have to be flexible these days. We obviously have to abide by the public health guidelines, by the school board, by the school rules. And so our plan right now is to limit the number of in-person meetings, do it all virtually. And I think there's opportunities there that we didn't realize before we got into this space. Just like in my industry where I work, we've had to do the same thing and adapt and be able to figure out how to do design reviews online. How do we share those CAD files? Is there a better platform for CAD? And we might talk about that a little bit more later. But I think it's important to think through and to have the coaches, mentors, leaders of the team have a plan, at least as a draft. Okay, if things look like this, this is what we're going to do. And then from there, get input from the schools, the principals, the teachers, the parents. I think it's important to keep that communication going as well, with parents especially. So as the season progresses, that they can understand what's coming, what things have changed, how the rules have been modified. Of course, masks all the time, regardless, but we're taking the approach of being conservative and meeting online and doing all the work that we can online. At a certain point, we'll get to a point where we have to manufacture parts. And part of the plan there is that we'll restrict that to maybe 2 students and a mentor accessing the workshop if things are in a condition where we can do that. And that's the Monday and Wednesday class. At our school, we have Monday, Wednesday cohort, and then a Tuesday, Thursday cohort. So the Monday, Wednesday, at the time that we're ready to make parts, a couple of students from Monday, Wednesday will be the team's representation in the shop. As they're making those parts that have been designed by others remotely, we'll have a webcam set up so that the other students who aren't able to be there in person can see how things are going, can ask questions, can learn. It's not as ideal as being there in person, but at least it keeps them involved. And then once the parts are finished, the plan is to leave them for a week, make sure they're all sanitized, and then take them to a particular student's home. And that student would be responsible for the assembly, again, with input from the rest of the team, video chat and so on. As they're assembling, it would be left for a week and then taken to another student's home to do wiring, and then again, a week, and then to another student's home for programming. Programming is probably one of the easiest things to have programmers involved remotely to be able to make changes and see the behavior of the robots. So I think it's important for teams to think through that before the season begins, and have a plan in place. Not that that plan has to stay static, but that they can adapt to the situation as it goes and just keep the communications open with all the stakeholders.
So for those Monday, Wednesdays when the students are going to be machining, is that during school time or is that after school or?
Yeah, our team is extracurricular, so it's after school. So that would be just after school, and it would be limited to probably 2 students. We're lucky enough to have a portable out behind our school where we have our workshop. So it's separate from the day-to-day life that's going on inside the school. So in that way, I guess we're lucky that we're already a little bit separated from the normal comings and goings.
And so, but your school is, because I know there's some schools that are like at 3 p.m. the entire school is shutting down this year. But so your school has like a little bit of an allowance, I guess, to go beyond that?
For extracurricular, and this is the way that it is right now, that may change as well.
Right.
But extracurriculars, we're allowed right now to have clubs.
Okay.
And that's not the sports people and so on, but for robotics, we understand right now that we can do that as clubs. And we're talking about manufacture. The FT season this year is quite long, so we're not restricted to a 6-week build. So hopefully we're a little further along into the fall before we start getting ready to make parts. And if that changes, we'll have to adapt to that. In the workshop, the Monday, Tuesday, or the Monday, Wednesday, and the Tuesday, Thursday also, they'll have a completely separate set of tools that they'll only use. And so the Monday, Wednesday won't be using the same tool set as the Tuesday, Thursdays.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's some great advice there, Matt, because I think that's more planning than most teams have gotten to. So like having that framework there, I think is really great for our teams to hear about that sort of stuff. And a reminder, and Matt touched on it, for all teams, please make sure you're following all of your local public health guidelines, all of them. I know sometimes in first, we get the rules and we're trying to live on the edges of the rules and we're trying to push boundaries, but that's not what you do with public health. That's just like, this is not when we're trying to push boundaries here, because pushing boundaries means that we could be putting ourselves at risk, putting our families at risk, and putting our entire communities at risk. So follow the public health guidelines. talk to your principal, talk to your school board people to find out what's allowed in your school. And, like Matt's found that they can do clubs, and that's amazing. But you do need to ask these questions when the time is right. But just remember, this is not an area where we want to be pushing boundaries. We have to be safe here. And it's not just for us, it's for everyone. Dan, what about you? How are things going up north?
We're in kind of a unique position in comparison to maybe some of the GTA schools where we're actually attending school every day. So we don't have any remote instruction at this time other than students that have opted for that. And similar to Matt's group in Hamilton, we are actually allowed to have extracurriculars provided we, as you mentioned, Karthik, follow public health guidelines. So one thing we're looking at doing, similar to what Matt mentioned, but having individual sets of tools that students can use.
Oh, I think we lost Dan again. But last time he came back pretty quickly. So
that we followed. Another thing that we're doing is we're trying to keep groups small. So typically we would say everyone's welcome, but in terms of the in-person meetings, we're trying to keep those very limited to key essential people that need to be there with a physical distance as well.
All right, hi Andrew.
All right, so yeah, I think we're in a somewhat different position to most of you guys. We're meeting fortnightly on a Saturday, and number one, like everyone said, is you got to look at the rules that apply in your area. So in Australia, our main rules are about distancing. So there's only so many people allowed in a room at any one time. We apply masks as a safety precaution, and we do contact tracing and basically control access to the workshop. So that way we're able to keep on top of it. And I guess culture-wise, the pandemic safety has been folded into our normal safety culture. So how we deal with this comes under the heading of take no chances and look out for each other. So just this morning, we had probably about 40 of our students gathered, spread out in the workshop space we have, all masked, all working, and all on top of obeying the safety rules. And that's kind of what we'll be adhering to. We look at the rules each week, and as they change, we adapt. And communication, I think Matt may mention that. Communication is number one. You keep in touch with the kids, you keep in touch with the parents, so everyone knows what's going on, and there are no surprises. Everyone's prepared for anything that might happen.
Thanks, Andrew. That's some great info. I just want to introduce, we have another panelist who's just joined us. So I want to say hello to Charmaine Lee from FTC Team 16895 Sapphires. Hi, Charmaine. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on. Right now, we're just talking a little bit about how teams are going to run during COVID. Some of our coaches have given us some advice and some of their plans. Do you have any plans for the Sapphires right now on how you think you're going to navigate this season?
Yes, we are a community team, and last year we ran in the church and meet every week in the church. So this year will be mostly online and still meet up in the church or in some students' home, but limited to like 2 or 3 students every time. So we'll try to plan with current COVID situation. Yeah, I think it's similar as other coaches mentioned about the school's plan. So mostly will be remotely online. Yeah, and then small group work.
I think the remote online stuff is a lot of stuff that everyone's going to be dealing with. Mike, what about your team? A lot of what you're doing is classroom based. So how are you going to try and make things work this season?
Like everybody else has said, we'll be doing a lot of remote stuff. One of the neat things for us is that this isn't our first shot at distance learning. We're one of 2 high schools in our board. So our catchment is about 110 kilometers wide and 150 kilometers tall. And as a result, we already have a lot of students from very far different regions. So one of the things we set up last year was a team Discord channel as well as a Google Classroom so that students could share resources and communicate whenever they had an idea or whenever they needed to contact somebody. With those tools in hand, we complement that with our in-class stuff so that everybody can be still included and contribute to team planning, but we can still move forward through the season.
Well, that's impressive that you had a little bit of a head start on this. And like, everything we're doing with remote learning right now, like a lot of it is in response to the pandemic, but this is maybe a wave of the future. And there's a lot, especially when we talk about the equity, diversity, inclusion piece, this is a great way to get people involved who might not have been able to be involved in the past, who might not be able to come to meetings because they have to stay home to take care of their younger sibling, or they have to be there to make dinner and all those sorts of things. So it does, with every sort of crisis, there is some opportunity. And so hopefully, we can learn some skills that can help us in the long run on this, and one of our comments in chat, a silver lining is be able to include others. And that's definitely a thing to be thinking about. So, we talked a bit about the remote stuff, and we're going to come back to remote in a bit. But for when teams are able to meet in person, what kind of practices are you going to have in terms of distancing, safety, and sanitation? I know Matt talked about this a bit, where he talked about, having a part and then leaving it for a week. Like, I know a lot of schools have rules right now about any shared object has to be disinfected between uses. So how are teams managing with those sorts of sanitation rules? I'll leave this one open to anyone who has any ideas, tips. And before we throw it out there, the First Canada website does have a list of best practices for teams that have been collected and placed online. So make sure you're taking a look at those. But what other best practices do people have?
I can mention one thing, Karthik, and again, it depends on administration and what their view is, but I'll give a shout out to Team 1305, FRC 1305. They designed a UV cube, a DIY UV cube that works to sterilize equipment, and that's one thing that we're looking at developing for our program. As you know, spraying electronics with liquid and sanitizer is, we may get that water game in a few minutes, but it's typically a no-go. So this UV cube using UV sanitation might be an option for some teams.
Yeah, that's a great option, those UV cards. And Team 1305, I suggest teams try and contact them, but also they're going to be having a conference in a few weeks, their Gateway conference, where I'm sure you can learn a lot more about that. I'm going to be a part of that one, and that'll be really interesting. Any other disinfection, sanitation ideas?
We're big on, I said, being able to trace anyone that comes into the workshop. So we have several stages of check-in. We only have one access point. Everyone comes in or out. Nobody comes in without signing in or checking. We do the disinfecting afterwards, and we do the remote where we can. But when you come in, you disinfect, you sign in. When you leave, you do the opposite. And we have the kids trained on disinfecting basically everything that's touched at the end of the session. But I guess the being able to track anybody that comes into the room is very, very important if there is an incident.
Yeah, contact tracing is critical to our efforts. So you can, you have that information and provide them to the public health officials, and they can go do their thing. So, we talked a lot about remote meetings, but I'd like to get into some more specifics. What tools are you using? What software? Is it a free plan? Is it an educator's plan? Just so our listeners out there who haven't started this sort of thing can start to learn. Like, I know a lot of people are talking about using Zoom. Have you purchased like a paid Zoom account? How are you all doing this? I'll leave it open to anyone.
Okay, so our school uses Google Suite. So we were looking at doing Google Meets. We also have a paid Slack channel, which allows you to do video and voice calls within the actual Slack. And there is a discount for charities. So if your team is registered as a charity, or if you have a sponsor or affiliate, you could look into getting a discounted rate for that. The thing is that we are trying to do what the students are most comfortable with. So we put out a lot of polls before we actually commit to doing anything, and say, hey, does everyone just want to be on a Google Doc and we'll type it out, or do we want to be on voice? So really letting the students dictate what they are comfortable with in those platforms.
Andrew?
Yep. Okay. So like Mike, we're kind of used to remote because we've got a catchment area that sounds pretty similar in size to yours, actually. We've even got a team member in Iowa just to make life interesting. So we've, when we're communicating with her, we'll typically use a Google Hangout or Google Docs, but we maintain a Slack channel for the team. It's not paid. We use the free version, but that works quite well. We've also played with Trello and Fleep, but Slack is the one that works. I guess the two main things that we look for in these platforms is A, stability, and B, child protection. So we've got to be able to make sure it's secure and we're not going to get anybody bouncing in that's not supposed to be there. And we adhere to all the standard safety, internet safety things. So Slack and Google work quite well for us.
Anyone else have some tools? I'm a big proponent of Slack. You also mentioned Trello there. I think Trello is a great task management tool for teams to use, especially because it can be shared simultaneously. You can use a desktop version. There's a really easy mobile version. You can color code things. It's very tappable. Like the mobile version is great. I love Trello for my own project management, but any project that I typically run, I try and move into Trello. And I've used that with our FRC team last year, and it worked pretty well.
Speaking, Karthik, just to the design piece, we also use a Google Classroom for team communication, but we also use Fusion 360 CAD software. And I know that's not necessarily an option for all teams, but we kind of use it as a collaboration tool for design and comments and feedback, where all students can access designs and collaborate with one another from their remote or home location.
So another piece that's been talked about is CAD, computer-aided design. And so, a lot of teams in FTC, because of the nature of the FTC kit, just kind of build. They don't actually CAD. But this year, especially because so much is being done remote, CAD might be something that needs to be done. So I have two questions: is like, how are you using CAD, and how are you sharing CAD online?
Hey, Karthik, I can speak to that.
Sure.
Our team, in terms of FRC, we've used Inventor and SolidWorks in the past. And you talk about COVID and the innovation that has to be made and the things that we can improve or get better as a result of a bad situation. So we've investigated a different CAD platform called Onshape. And Onshape is an online cloud version of CAD. It's got similar functionality to Inventor. It's absolutely free. And it eliminates the roadblock with Inventor or SolidWorks of getting the students access to a computer that can run it, being able to synchronize files, even though there are tools to be able to do that. Onshape we found is amazing. Through the summer, we've been doing different projects and having collaboration from the different students to build up an assembly in CAD of a practice robot. And they're all able to contribute. The other great thing about Onshape is it's not just about the CAD files, but you can attach to those little projects PDFs or design calculations. So it's an excellent tool for online collaboration. And we're probably moving that way as a permanent fix. I think a lot of the FRC teams, especially in the States, have found that Onshape is a great tool to use in place. Not that there's anything wrong with Inventor or SolidWorks, and they can be made to be used, but Onshape is just so accessible. And there's a lot of great tutorials and training documentation that's out of the box. The kids can get up and running and start collaborating very quickly.
Very cool. So now with Onshape, Matt, can you have like two students working in the same model at the same time? Kind of like, like with Google Docs, you can have two people in the same spreadsheet, or is that a restriction?
Yeah, like typically in an Inventor program, they have a vaulting system where you're not able to access other files, so you don't overwrite each other. And Onshape has a version of that which prevents two people from modifying the same drawing or document at the same time. So it's amazing the amount of features that it has and that it's free.
That's very cool. Can it run on, like a basic laptop, or does you need like a certain graphics card, or?
It runs on a pretty cheap little laptop, and all the files, the other advantage is all the files are stored in the cloud. So if you're collaborating with someone and you're in a different time frame, or you're not able to link up with them in real time, you can see at the end of the day, the mentor can go on and see what the student has accomplished throughout the day. The files are all there and all available. You don't have to worry about your hard drive crashing or backing things up. It's pretty cool stuff.
That's very cool. So yeah, Onshape, that's a resource out there for our teams. I see a couple mentions in chat about GrabCAD. Andrew and Kate, I think you're both familiar with that.
Yep, our team swears by it.
So can you want to explain to our viewers how GrabCAD works? Give us like the high level overview.
Yeah, well, high level will have to be because I know enough about that system to be dangerous. So, basically, it works 2 levels. So we use a program called IronCAD. And what we do with our CAD team, they organize the robot into subsystems. So that way we can get around, each system has its own diagram. So we can get around the multiple people not able to access the file at any one time. They upload that to the GrabCAD server and able to share it that way. And they can pull down individual parts or they can pull down the whole diagram as they wish to work. So that's the high level anyway.
Well, that's very cool. And I think, when it comes to remote learning, to be able to have multiple students working on a project together and it collaborates and it seamlessly goes together in CAD, that might be one of the recipes. So we are running down on time here and we're almost ready for the official game reveal. So I do want to go around the room one more time. Any last words, any comments you have for our community about this upcoming season? Charmaine, I'll start with you since you, you haven't had as much airtime as everyone else.
Okay. Yeah, this year's very special, but meanwhile, it's also exciting. And then, early in March, we thought, oh, maybe by June, everything will be back to normal, but apparently it's not that quick. So we have to plan going forward in the next year or two, maybe have to live like this. And also going forward, the new technology, maybe there will be more remote chances. So it's kind of education for everyone, including students and coaches, mentors, that to adapt to this. Yeah, a little disappointing, but meanwhile still exciting. So we're going to see what are we going to experience this year, and really appreciate actually the schedule. I mean, the first kind of schedule being catered with current situation, so give us a bit more time and not that stress. So yeah, again, it's exciting year coming. So we'll see.
Thank you, Charmaine. Kate?
My parting words for everybody is keep on keeping on. We are still here for you. Don't go away and ask for help.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Matt?
Collaboration. So I think as the season goes on, you'll be able to see what other teams are doing in terms of their robot and be able to learn from what they've done and share some of that experience. That's what a normal FTC season would involve. But I think this year especially, collaborate and learn from others about how they're approaching things. COVID is a problem that not just FIRST is facing, industry is facing it, society is facing it. Now's the chance to learn from each other best practices and how to improve. Don't be afraid to reach out to others. If you see that they're doing something that you might be interested in, ask them about what they're doing and see if you can learn from them. And of course, be safe.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Dan?
I think, I can speak for the FRC mentors to say that the end to last season was very disappointing for a variety of reasons. I think going forward, though, it's nice to have a kickoff event and to get back to a sense of opportunity, right? And have a breath of fresh air. So I'm really looking forward to that and working with my students once again.
Thanks, Dan. Andrew, all the way from Australia?
What we'd recommend is be prepared to create opportunities and look for advantages. I did make a comment early on that if your team is on a mission to survive, you can find that inspires great amount of creativity and purpose. And that if you can ride that wave, your kids can thrive even in this environment.
Opportunities and advantages, absolutely. And finally, Mike.
I'd like to echo what Kate said. Remember that you're not alone out there. If a team needs help, there's lots of resources, lots of people to reach out to get that help. Beyond that, good luck, have fun, and hopefully we'll be able to get together again soon.